anyone who feels, some urgency, they just gotta finish their rounds. You can carry on. It's okay. All right, let's have a look. We're in chapter 39. February 19. Okay. During Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshtarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Oh, okay. But we read the first paragraph. Oh, no, maybe we didn't. Oh, I read it just to myself. Okay, so February 1972, and we are in Vrindavan. We're in Vrindavan. Yes. During Prabhupada's absence from Vrindavan, the devotees had been unable to persuade Mr. S. to grant legal permission for ISKCON to use the land. Prabhupada had insistently directed one of his Indian-born disciples, Shiradakshai, to acquire from Mr. S. an actual deed. Shiradakshai had pleaded with Mr. S., and seeing Mr. S.'s indecision, he had spoken with Mrs. S., and then with the two of them together. Mr. and Mrs. S. had agreed that since they could not decide, they would put the matter before Srimati Radharani herself. Mrs. S. had asked Shiradakshai to take 2 slips of paper and to write yes on one and no on the other. These she had folded and placed before the family deity of Radha Krishna. She had then asked Shiradakshai to pick one of the papers. Shiradakshai had done so, and in the presence of Mr. and Mrs. S. and Radha and Krishna, he had opened the piece of paper on which was written the word yes. When Prabhupada had heard the news, he had been joyous. He said, I am especially pleased upon you that you have secured the S land for Krishna. Now let us cooperate to build up a wonderful center there in Vrindavan. In March 1972, Prabhupada returned to Vrindavan to sign the deed with Mr. S. and to perform the groundbreaking ceremony. With permission from the Goswamis at the Radha Damodar temple, he arranged for quarters for his disciples so they would have a place to reside while the temple at Ramanreti was under discussion. Yamuna, it just so happened that on the morning that the Goswamis were to sign an agreement with Prabhupada for use of the rooms at Radha Damodar, the electricity went out. Prabhupada's secretary had only an electric typewriter. So I reminded Prabhupada that I was trained in writing calligraphy. Yes. I had my writing pens with me, so immediately Prabhupada drafted the writing that he wanted, and I took it into another room sat down and hand-lettered a contract with gold embossing on all the capitals. Within 15 minutes, we presented it to Srila Prabhupada. Before the Goswamis, Prabhupada held up the document with pleasure and said, "Just see, my disciples are expert in everything." Now the devotees would be allowed to reside above his rooms at Radha Damodar temple, and they would also have access to his rooms for cleaning. Prabhupada felt it was a grand occasion, that there was something in writing for the preservation of his rooms in the Radha Damodar temple. To close the transaction for the land in Ramanreti, Prabhupada and Mr. S. met at the magistrate's court in Mathura. In the presence of lawyers, they completed the formalities. Prabhupada saw it as Krishna's grace that he had acquired a good plot of land in Vrindavan, and writing to his GBC secretaries in America, he asked them to send as many men as possible to help in the new project. He described his intentions, quote, "for raising up a very excellent center to revive the spiritual life for Vrindavan on behalf of Rupa and Jiva Goswamis." Prabhupada told Kshirodakshai, actually it's Kshirodakshai Vishnu. I knew this devotee quite well. He passed away, but I knew him quite well from London. He was living in London. Prabhupada told Kshirodakshai Vishnu, "I want on this occasion huge prasadam should be prepared, and every man in Vrindavan should be invited and take prasadam." 2 days later, with 100 people attending, Prabhupada held the cornerstone laying ceremony at Ramanreti. Again he descended into the ceremonial pit and placed the deity of Ananta, on whose head the temple would rest. But late that night, the land was attacked. An elderly Indian widow with local famous sadhu became angry that Mr. S. had not given her the land, which she had several times requested. During the night, she sent Gundas to dismantle the brick foundation of the ceremonial cornerstone and to desecrate the pit, which had just that day been filled with flowers and religious objects. The Gundas dug open the hole, threw garbage into it, and stole the posted sign announcing the land's new ownership. Prabhupada was in his room at the Radha Damodar temple when he heard what had happened. He became angry and told his disciples to show the deed to the police. That night, several policemen guarded the land, and when the hired Gundas came again, the police accosted them and warned that if they caused any more trouble, they would be arrested. And that was the end of that. Prabhupada had several times said that by becoming a devotee, one gains many enemies. The incident also served to confirm Prabhupada's conviction that ISKCON's taking possession of the land should be followed as quickly as possible by construction of a temple. They should at least encircle the land with a fence, build small huts, and live on the land while preparing for temple construction. Tejas. This will be the Krishna Balaram temple, Prabhupada said. We didn't really know what was going on. We all thought it was so far away. It was really the boondocks, Raman-Reti. Nobody was out there. It was such an isolated place, and there were lots of dacoits living out there. We thought, if we're going to have a temple out here, no one will ever come. But Prabhupada said, wherever there is Krishna, everyone will come. And of course, if you know the situation there, now, I mean, not just around our temple, but way out, further out of town, it's built up in such a big way. Prabhupada's secretary, Shamsundar, wrote to a godbrother about the newly acquired Vrindavan property as follows. Earlier in the day before breakfast, Prabhupada sewed up the 4,800 square yard gift plot in Raman-Reti, where Krishna used to sport with friends in the forest, about 10 minutes walk from Radha Damodar. 10 minutes. 10 minutes run. I mean, really, you wouldn't make it in 10 minutes, even if you ran at Olympic speed. Prabhupada surveyed the land with the rope from his mosquito net, bargained for, drew plans for, drew up the deed for, went to Mathura magistrate's court for, and signed, sealed, and delivered in an instant. Prabhupada has asked me to request you that, in capital letters, at least 50 men from the US must come to India immediately, in capital letters, 3 exclamation marks. At last we've got a solid program in India. Huge projects at Mayapur, Vrindavan and Bombay. All the lands are acquired, arrangements made, and everything by Prabhupada. But only a few of us men are here to struggle with an immense task, the biggest by far within the society, of developing these 3 places. And believe me, these projects are more dear to Prabhupada than any yet contemplated. In the month while Prabhupada was away from Bombay, he had left on February 10th, the payment of 50,000 rupees was duly made. Slowly at first, a few devotees moved to the Juhu land, living in a tent. At night, the rats and mosquitoes would disturb the devotees' sleep. While attempting to clear the overgrown weeds, they came upon empty liquor bottles and overflowing sewage. Without Prabhupada present, their resolution grew weak. But then Brahmananda Swami returned from Calcutta, where he had been with Srila Prabhupada. Brahmananda Swami was inspired, and he gave the Bombay devotees new impetus. They would have to clear the land and raise a pandal right away. Brahmananda Swami had never put on a pandal program before, but he hired a contractor to build several chatai, palm frond houses for the devotees, and a festival tent. Even before the construction could begin, however, the devotees would have to thoroughly clear the land. Mr. Sethi, a neighbor and life member, hired a work crew to cut down the weeds and vegetation, and several life members and friends in Bombay also came forward to assist. Mr. N offered to help by sending one of his assistants, Mr. Mata, to organize the hired laborers in clearing the fields. The devotees also worked in preparation for Prabhupada's return. Actually, Mr. Sethi, he's passed away now. He was a very dedicated person, not initiated, but just sold out to Prabhupada. And I remember on Prabhupada's disappearance day one year, several years ago or something like that, he spoke about his first meeting with Prabhupada. And he said that, what was it? He was helping with some things on the land. And one day he met Prabhupada personally, and Prabhupada asked him, "So, what's your program?" And Mr. Sethi assumed that Prabhupada meant, "What do you do? What's your work or business or something? What's your program?" And he said, Mr. Sethi said, "Well, I'm in construction. I build blocks of flats." And Prabhupada said, No, that's not what I mean. I mean, what is your morning program?" He's asking him about his spiritual, religious program. "What's your morning program?" And Mr. Sethi said, he told Prabhupada, "Well, I get up, I have a cup of tea, read the newspaper, and go to work." And Prabhupada said, "What is the difference between you and a pig?" And Mr. Sethi told us this, Prabhupada's disappearance day. And Mr. Sethi said at first he was shocked. Wow. But then he thought about it and he realized it was true. Okay. Sri Sri Radha Rasa Bihari arrived at Hare Krishna land in a taxi, riding across the laps of several devotees. They had moved before, and this time their residence was a tent. They had first come to be with the devotees of Bombay during the Pandal program at Cross Maidan in downtown Bombay. On that occasion, there had been a procession to Chowpatty Beach, and when the devotees had arrived, Radha Rasa Bihari, beautifully dressed and decorated and installed in an ornate palanquin, had been awaiting them. Krishna was white marble and held a silver flute. Radharani's right hand, palm forward, extended a benediction. They were beautiful. After their first appearance at Chowpatty, Radha Rasa Bihari had moved to the Akash Ganga building, where gradually the devotees had established a decent standard of deity worship. When Prabhupada had left orders that Radha Rasa Bihari should move to Juhu as soon as the down payment was made, some of the devotees had questioned him. Why should the deity move before the facilities were proper? Shouldn't they wait until the temple was built? Once the deity is installed on a piece of property, Prabhupada had replied, no one will remove them. More than anyone else, Prabhupada was aware of the proper worship to be offered to Radha Rasa Bihari, but his emphasis now was on securing the land. How else, he reasoned, could he eventually give Radha Rasa Bihari a royal throne and temple unless they themselves first established their right of proprietorship by taking up residence at Hare Krishna land? The arrival of Radha Rasabihari at Juhu also meant increased difficulties for the devotees, who now had to struggle to maintain the morning puja and cook 6 daily offerings in the meager kitchen. Even Radha Rasabihari's tent was insubstantial and swayed in the wind. Srila Prabhupada, however, saw the move as a necessary transcendental tactic. He felt certain that everyone involved, himself, the owners of the land, the Bombay municipality, would accept that the land belonged to Krishna, since Krishna was already residing there. And because he was asking Lord Krishna himself to accept these inconveniences, he prayed to the deity, "My dear sir, please remain here, and I shall build a beautiful temple for you." By the time Prabhupada returned to Bombay, Radha Rasabihari were installed on the stage of the festival pandal. Attendance at the festival was not as great as it would have been in downtown Bombay. No more than 500 people came a night, but Prabhupada was satisfied. This festival was on their own property, and this was only the beginning. Every evening, Prabhupada lectured at the pandal and attended the kirtan and arti before Radha Rasabihari. Panchadravida Swami had collected donations of 5 tons of dal, rice and flour, and the devotees were regularly cooking enough khichdi to serve 125 people free prasadam daily. In the evening, Prabhupada himself would give out halava from the deity's plate, and the crowd, including well-to-do businessmen and their wives, would press forward to receive the prasadam. Prabhupada liked the festival so much that he told the devotees to arrange to keep the tent for a perpetual festival. Prabhupada lived on the land in a tent, just like the other devotees, until a Mr. Acharya, one of the more favorable tenants living in the back of the property, invited him to stay at his home. Within a few days of his arrival at Juhu, Prabhupada was ready to hold the ground-breaking and cornerstone-laying ceremony, another tactic for securing possession of the land. But it was more than a tactic, as he wanted a temple constructed as soon as possible. Radha Rasabihari should not remain standing in a tent, but should be protected by a silver and teakwood singasana on a marble altar. They should be surrounded by deities of the 2 gopis, Lalita and Vishaka, and their temple should have marble domes more than 100 feet high. Thousands should come daily for darshan and prasadam. One morning, in the midst of the festival activities, the devotees of Hare Krishna land joined Prabhupada in a simple cornerstone-laying ceremony. They had dug a deep ceremonial pit and surrounded it with bricks. Prabhupada descended and placed the deity of Anantashesh. Then, sitting on a simple platform, Prabhupada accompanied the kirtan by playing a brass gong, while one by one the devotees came before him and threw dirt into the pit, filling it, while smoke rose from the sacrificial fire. Prabhupada was outraged that Brahmananda Swami had agreed to pay the contractors 40,000 rupees for the pandal construction. It was the same old thing. The foolish Western disciples getting cheated. Prabhupada refused to pay. 4,000 rupees should be more than enough. When the contractors came to see them, he told them that he had little money and that they would have to be satisfied with 4,000 rupees. They protested, but Prabhupada became angry and insisted, "Accept it. You are making 500% profit." As soon as they see us, Prabhupada said later, they say, "These Americans, they have got money. Our work is going on in India, but as soon as money is being spent, 50% is being spoiled because you Americans are inexperienced. What can be done? The Indians want your money and they cheat like anything." During the Pandal festival, the tenement neighbors had become disturbed by kirtans over the loudspeaker. They were already disturbed that their landlord, Mr. N, was slow to repair the buildings and would sometimes let them go a full week without water before fixing the plumbing. Being suddenly forced to live with more than 20 American devotees only exacerbated their dissatisfaction. Some of the neighbors were converted Christians and unsympathetic to Vaishnavism. They even feared their children might again be converted to Hinduism. Some tenants claimed the devotees were infringing on their privacy. Some criticized the devotees for arguing among themselves. And others criticized that the unmarried men and women were living in close proximity, even though in separate quarters. A few of the neighbors, however, could see that the Western Vaishnavas were struggling to sincerely worship Radha and Krishna. None of the tenants criticized Prabhupada, however, so when he was present, he was able to pacify them and resolve any disagreements. But Prabhupada knew that after he left, the situation could easily become volatile. Prabhupada was planning an extensive world tour, traveling eastward to Australia, Japan, Hawaii, the US, and maybe Mexico and Europe. It might be as long as half a year before he could return to India. And he wanted things to progress smoothly in Bombay without him. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, devotees. We've got a very important question. Means we'll all be together and we'll be ISKCON. Yeah, we'll all be together and we may all remember each other. We may not also, but we may remember each other. And we'll all be together. And as a group, we'll be under Prabhupada and we'll be ISKCON. And you'll be there too. Yeah. Okay?
What if we have different moods and we will end up somewhere different in Vaikuntha?
Well, our underlying mood should be service to the spiritual master, service to Prabhupada. And if that's there, we'll all be together. Even though, in certain senses we already have different moods, definitely, to different degrees. That's personalism. We're not going to be, we're not going to be like really different moods, like anti-Prabhupada or not pro-Prabhupada. No. But you may be a book distributor in Goloka Vrindavan, and Yashoda Rani will be a pujari. Lalita Kund may be a cook. I don't know, but we'll see. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.